Today's video, I'm looking at how I made this, and I've made it as a notebook holder, but you could easily add a concertina spine down this section and turn it into a small memory book or album if you want to make one of those. It's got a place at the back here for a holder that I can put a notebook in, and that's an A6 notebook, which is about 15 centimetres by 10.5. But it will take something slightly bigger, so it'd probably take an American size A2 notebook, I'm thinking. The overall size of it is 5 by 7, obviously plus the spine. And I've used Couture Creations My Secret Love papers to decorate this. Beautiful collection, and this plaque is cut from one of the papers as well. So I've used that. I've used some rainbow mirror card and some I think it's actually called latte, but some sort of light creamy beige coloured card from that I had in my stash of card that coordinated with these. Now this is just made from normal card, but it's quite sturdy. Okay, so I've used 300 GSM white card. It's the same card I use for my card blanks, and you just end up, you put so many layers together, it turns into something really quite substantial. So I just want to talk through the tools I've used to make this and kind of how to get started. There is a blog post that goes with this that details the right order to do things in, because if for some of these pages, particularly this section at the back that the notebook goes into, if you try and start sticking things down in the wrong order, and for this as well, the pen holder, if you stick things down in the wrong order, you make life very difficult for yourself. So do have a look at the blog post. The link is in the video description if you scroll down. So as I say, have a look at the blog post. But I just wanted to go through how I'd used some of the tools and what tools I'd used. So I've used Couture Creations scoreballs for this. I'm lucky I've got both. I've got the big one and the small one. But you could do this just using the small one. You just need to think about what order you're doing things in again a bit more carefully. So Couture Creations scoreboard. So if I'm using the little one, and let me put well, if I'm using the big one, it's easy. So let me start there. And I'm going to just move the camera down a bit. Now this gets quite tricky for me because I haven't got an overhead camera. I need to try and get this where you can see what I'm doing. So I've got a sheet of A4 card because I'm in the UK, so I'm on European card sizes, but I only want it 11 inches long. So if I've got a big scoreboard, I can mark my 11-inch point with my scoring tool, and then I can go and trim my card down to get started. Or, and you could do this with a large one or a small one, I can score it at 5 inches because I'm doing a 5 by 7 card size. Okay, that's how I do it on the big one. If I'm using the small one, let me just move that. Now one of the reasons this is imperial is because the scoreboard is in imperial sizes. So this isn't quite long enough, but I can score my line as far as I can, and then I'm going to flip my card over, and then I'm going to score the rest of the way, and that will let me fold my card. Okay, now when you're folding your card, bend it in, and then put it up against the edge of something like your scoreboard, so that both edges are in there and flat against that before you start burnishing the crease, and that will mean you actually crease straight. The score line obviously helps with that, but that really make sure it doesn't go wonky as you're folding it. And I'm going to burnish that. And that gives me my first crease. Okay, now I then need to be able to do the other side, and I need to cut this to size first. So let me bring in my mini guillotine. And again, I'm using the Couture Creations mini guillotine. Love it. It's a really good workhorse. Got to have been using this for 18 months at least. Could be coming up to 2 years. I can't quite remember when I got it. Okay, so I've marked where my 11-inch mark was on there. Okay, so I can flip this over and put it in my trimmer, and then I can line that mark up with where the bottom of my blade is. Now, that might move a bit, but let me try and get the camera to just see that. Where am I? There, let me zoom the camera in on that. So you can maybe see that. You can see I've put my mark against the bottom of the blade there. Okay. So it doesn't matter if this ends up, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch out. Because we haven't scored the other side yet, and the difference will end up in the middle. That won't really matter. So just trim off the excess card. And then back to my scoring board. And I can then score the other end of this at 5 inches. You see that? So I'm coming to my 5-inch mark here. Scoring that down. I can flip it top to bottom and score the last bit. And then again I can fold that. I want that. Start to fold it. Make sure that I've got my 2 layers up against an edge that's going to keep them together. I might use that edge actually, it might be easier. So you can see it wants to kind of twist. So what I want to do is just pull that so that both the edges are together, and then I can crease that on the score line. And it means my ends match up. Let's burnish that. So I've got the start there. Okay, got that a bit. So I've got the start there. Okay, with both my sides the same. But now I need to sort out the length because I only want it 7 inches long. So again, I could, if I've got the big scoreboard, I could mark at 7 inches and then put it in the trimmer. That is one way of doing it. Or you might have a larger paper trimmer of some sort. But to get a nice edge, I like to use the guillotine. So that's one way. Another thing I do, because I've been making a lot of 5x7 cards, is I've actually made a kind of an extension measure for my mini guillotine. So I've taken a piece of card and I've marked in from one end an inch, and I've decided that's where I'm going to line up my 6-inch mark. So I've got various lines on here, so that if I'm cutting mats and layers for 7x5 cards, I've got some guides of how much a card I'm cutting. So the end of this would be where its 7 inches are, and you've got the grid lines on your mini guillotine. So you can actually line this up and make sure it's straight. I've made sure it's not long enough that it's going to go near the blade, because that will give you problems with getting a slightly wonky cut. So I'm going to line my 6-inch mark up on my piece of card with the 6-inch grid lines and tape it down top and bottom. Now, obviously this isn't, you know, scientifically accurate, but it is a great way of just getting a guide for a card size, because let's face it, it's just a card, and so it doesn't matter if it's that tiny bit out. Okay, so I can put this in here And I do this when I'm making card lengths. I actually fold my card and then I cut it. Now, I've actually just noticed I've got a bit of a soft corner on my piece of card. Let me just zoom in, show you what I mean. Oops. So my piece of card has obviously had a bit of a ding at some point. So I'm going to trim that off, that end, and then I'm going to measure my 7 inches once I've done that. So my corner of its dinged end, actually that's, yeah, let me trim both ends. So again, I use this for making card lengths. So I do quite often trim both ends of my card to make sure they're both square to my fold and that I've got rid of any dinged corners. So hold it very firmly because I'm going through 2 layers of 300 GSM card. And that cuts through that really nicely, gives me a beautiful edge on there. Then I can flip it over. And do make sure you've got your crease at the top. That needs to be where you've got the strongest cutting. And then I can line it up with the edge of my extension piece. And let me just see if I'm going to zoom in on that. Yeah, so I'm lined up here flush with this extension. Okay, so again, hold it nice and firmly and cut. Okay, and that's how you get the beginning of your album, notebook holder, whatever you're making. And let me put that out the way and bring the one I've made back in. I'm not going to actually go from making the book in this video, say details are in the blog post, but just a few things to be careful of. So I'm going to open this up. So you can see in here, let's take my pen out so I don't lose it, and my notebook. There we are. Right. So the really, really important thing is when you're decorating both the outside and the inside is that the score lines that you can see, and let me zoom the camera in, the score lines are the score lines on this original first piece that you've cut. Okay, the camera's not really picking that up. So where I've got my score lines in the middle, yeah, you'd never cover those over. So all my pieces that I've cut to reinforce that spine and for my mats and layers on the pages, let me zoom out just a bit more, one way. Okay, none of them cover up those score lines. So what I've done is I've cut an extra layer of white card that completely covers the inside cover before I've started matting and layering. But on this edge, I'm not sure that camera's focusing properly. On this edge here and this edge here for the back one, I've cut it an 1/8 of an inch, no, a 1/16 of an inch shorter than the 5x7, so that it won't cover up that score line. And then for the spine, because that's got a piece of white card stuck on it to reinforce it, obviously I need to then cut that an 1/8 of an inch narrower so that it misses the score line on both sides. Okay, and then the layers on top of that narrow again if you want a little bit of white to show. So that is really important to remember, otherwise it won't fold properly. Okay, so that's basically how you bring it together. As I say, details are on the blog post. Go back to normal zoom. Especially for making this pen holder, I've made mine 1/2 inch deep. That might have been a bit deep, my pens wobble about a bit, but might be an idea to check the pens you're going to put in and see if you can get away with doing a bit less than 1/2 inch, or whether or not you want it that thick. You might, before you stick this layer down, actually put a piece of elastic underneath in place here to help keep the pens in. So there we are. That's how I made my notebook holder. Thank you for watching.